The sun was shining brightly over the quiet, tree-lined street of a wealthy neighborhood. The houses were large and well-maintained, each with manicured lawns and private pools sparkling under the afternoon light. Among them was a mansion that stood out, not just for its size, but for the sense of calm and order that seemed to radiate from it. Behind the tall iron gates, a man who had worked for years to build his life was enjoying a rare moment of peace. He had risen from very humble beginnings. His childhood had been tough, filled with challenges that tested him in ways most people couldn't imagine. He had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce and prejudice was common. People often judged him based on the color of his skin rather than the content of his character. Despite this, he was determined to succeed. Every obstacle became a lesson, every failure a stepping stone toward a better life. Now, after years of hard work, sacrifices, and relentless determination, he was a millionaire. His business, which he had started from nothing, had grown into a respected and profitable enterprise. He owned multiple properties, invested wisely, and had built a reputation for fairness and intelligence. But more than anything, he valued the freedom and peace that came with his success. On this particular afternoon, he had decided to take a break from his busy schedule. The office calls could wait, the meetings could be postponed, and the world could go on without him for a little while. He wanted to enjoy the moment. He slipped into his swimsuit and stepped out onto the patio, feeling the warm tiles under his feet. The pool water glistened invitingly, and he could hear the faint rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. He settled into a comfortable lounge chair by the edge of the pool, taking a deep breath and letting the tension of the week melt away. The music from the small speaker by the pool filled the air with a soft, calming rhythm. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the quiet, the sunlight, and the feeling of having created a life on his own terms. In this space, he felt safe and untouchable, a world away from the struggles that had shaped him. As he floated a little in the pool, he reflected on his journey. He remembered the late nights he had spent working on business plans, the times he had faced rejection, and the moments when he had wondered if it was all worth it. He thought about the people who had doubted him, the obstacles placed in his path simply because of who he was. And yet, here he was, living proof that determination and integrity could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. But life, he knew, was rarely so simple. Even in a neighborhood like this, appearances could be deceiving. Some people were willing to make assumptions, to judge without evidence, and to act on those judgments. He had encountered this many times before, but it was still frustrating. He believed in fairness, in respect, and in the idea that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity. And yet the world often operated on suspicion and bias. He was lost in these thoughts when he heard a distant hum of engines. At first he ignored it, thinking it was just a car passing by on the street. But the sound grew louder, and soon 2 patrol cars turned onto his street, their lights flashing faintly even in the bright sunlight. He felt a flicker of unease. It was unusual to see police in this part of the neighborhood unless there was a real emergency. The cars stopped in front of his gate, and the officers stepped out. He watched them, curious but cautious as they approached. Something about their posture and the way they scanned the property made him tense. They didn't look like they were here for a friendly visit. The peaceful afternoon he had been enjoying suddenly felt fragile, as if the calm air had been pierced by an invisible tension. He got out of the pool and wrapped a towel around his shoulders. He walked toward the gate, maintaining a calm demeanor. He wanted to understand why the officers were here before reacting. It was important to stay composed, to avoid escalating a situation that didn't need to be escalated. He took a deep breath and opened the gate. The officers looked at him for a moment as if sizing him up. One of them spoke first, his tone clipped and businesslike. He asked if he lived at the property, and the man nodded, explaining politely that he did. He showed them his ID when asked, keeping his voice calm and steady. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just a quiet assurance that this was his home, and he had nothing to hide. But the officers didn't seem satisfied. Their questions continued, each one carrying a subtle edge that hinted at doubt. The man noticed the tension in the air, and the way one of the officers kept his hand near his belt, close to where a holster would be. He realized that this was not just about protocol or procedure. This was about perception, about bias, and about the assumptions people made without knowing the truth. He maintained his composure, remembering the lessons life had taught him. He knew that reacting with anger or frustration would only make the situation worse. He kept his movements slow and deliberate, showing confidence without aggression. Every word he spoke was measured, every gesture calm. He wanted to convey dignity and control, even in the face of unnecessary scrutiny. As he spoke to the officers, he noticed neighbors peeking from behind their curtains and fences. They were watching silently, some curious, others perhaps amused. He understood that his life, his success, and even his presence in this neighborhood were points of fascination for some. People liked to see how others lived, especially when those lives didn't fit their preconceived notions. Despite the discomfort, he didn't let it break his focus. He explained who he was, how long he had lived in the neighborhood, and the work he had done to build his life. He spoke with pride but without arrogance, sharing a glimpse of the journey that had brought him here. His words were calm, yet firm, a reminder that he had earned his place and would not be intimidated. The officers exchanged brief glances, and he could sense their unease growing. They were faced with someone who did not fit the stereotype they had unconsciously carried in their minds. He realized that the real challenge wasn't proving his ownership of the property or his identity. It was confronting the assumptions that society often placed on people like him. It was a quiet battle, one that required patience and clarity. As the conversation continued, he felt a mix of emotions: frustration, patience, and a subtle satisfaction. He was frustrated that such encounters still happened, that bias and misunderstanding could intrude on a moment of peace. Yet he was patient, knowing that his calm approach could diffuse the situation, and he felt satisfaction in the knowledge that he could handle it, that he could navigate the complexity with grace. Time seemed to stretch as the officers continued their questioning, but he did not rush. He answered each inquiry honestly and respectfully, never raising his voice or letting frustration show. He understood the power of composure, the strength in remaining grounded when others tried to shake it. His presence, calm and assured, was itself a statement, a silent assertion of dignity and self-respect. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officers paused, reassessing the situation. The tension in the air was palpable, yet he did not waver. He remained calm, confident, and entirely in control of his own emotions. It was a delicate balance, managing the encounter without confrontation, proving authority without aggression. As the officers lingered, unsure of what to do next, he realized that the day he had started with simple intentions, a quiet afternoon by the pool, had turned into something more significant. It was a test of character, a moment that reflected the larger struggles he had faced throughout his life. And he knew that how he handled it would matter far beyond this single encounter. He decided that he would not let fear or anger dictate his actions. He would remain composed, observant, and measured. Every word, every gesture, every decision would reflect the life he had built, the principles he had lived by, and the respect he demanded for himself and others. The pool, the sun, and the quiet neighborhood were still around him, but they now carried a sense of vigilance, a reminder that even peace must sometimes be defended. And so, he stood there calm and unwavering, as the officers continued their presence at his gate. The afternoon sun reflected off the water, casting gentle ripples across the patio. He thought of the journey that had brought him here, the struggles, the victories, and the lessons learned along the way. He was not just defending a property. He was affirming a life, a story of resilience, determination, and dignity. And in that quiet strength, he found a sense of control that no misunderstanding or prejudice could take away. The afternoon sunlight continued to pour over the backyard, glinting off the pool water in gentle waves. The man had regained a sense of calm after the initial tension with the officers. But even as he relaxed slightly, he knew that this encounter was far from over. There was a strange rigidity in the officers' movements and a quiet defensiveness in their tone. It was clear they were uncomfortable, and he understood why. They had come with assumptions, and now reality was challenging those assumptions. He stood upright, letting the towel slip from his shoulders, and addressed the officers again with a calm, steady voice. He explained that this was his home, his property, and that he had every right to be there. The officers glanced around the luxurious backyard, noticing the well-kept garden, the pool, and the outdoor furniture. Everything seemed ordinary, yet the officers' doubt lingered. It was not about legality. It was about their own perceptions, clouded by biases they likely didn't even realize. As he spoke, he noticed subtle gestures from the officers. One kept his hand near his side, and the other kept scanning the area as if expecting someone to appear out of nowhere. The man realized that fear and suspicion could make even trained individuals behave unpredictably. He needed to manage the situation without confrontation, to assert his identity and ownership calmly, but firmly. He decided to take a strategic approach. Instead of arguing, he invited them to follow him on a small tour of the property. He walked at a slow pace, unlocking the doors to different parts of the house, showing them the interior, the office, and the various certificates of ownership and business achievements displayed neatly. He spoke politely, explaining the meaning of each award, each framed certificate, and each photograph on the walls. He wanted to humanize himself, to show that he was not just a figure of suspicion, but a person with a story of hard work, sacrifice, and success. The officers exchanged glances as they walked. The air was tense, but he maintained his calm demeanor. He noticed the slight shift in their posture, the tiny signs of uncertainty creeping into their expressions. They were beginning to realize that this man's life was far more than they had assumed. They had walked into what they thought might be a simple situation, but it had become a lesson in humility for them, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Despite his calm, the man could feel a simmering frustration beneath the surface. It was not directed at the officers personally, but at the fact that in a country that prided itself on fairness and justice, prejudice could still shape encounters in such profound ways. He had faced this many times before, yet it never became easier. The difference now was that he had the means, the knowledge, and the experience to handle it with poise. As they continued moving through the property, he spoke about his journey briefly, not as a complaint but as context. He explained how he had built his business from the ground up, the obstacles he had faced, and the discrimination he had encountered. He described moments of doubt and fear, the nights when he worked tirelessly without knowing if he would succeed, and the sacrifices he had made along the way. His voice was calm, but it carried weight, the weight of lived experience that could not be ignored. The officers listened, though their expressions remained guarded. It was clear they were uncomfortable, perhaps realizing that their assumptions had been unfounded. But discomfort did not immediately translate into understanding. They still had a job to do, a sense of authority to maintain, even if the reality before them was challenging that authority. At one point, one of the officers asked a pointed question about the pool, the landscaping, and the ownership of the property. The man responded with clarity and evidence, pointing to legal documents he kept in the office. He maintained a calm tone, never raising his voice, yet making it clear that he was in control. The officers seemed to hesitate, unsure how to respond, caught between protocol and the undeniable truth of his ownership. He noticed a neighbor peek through the fence, curious about the unfolding scene. The man felt a mix of irritation and acceptance. In this neighborhood, curiosity was part of the social landscape. People liked to watch, to judge, to speculate. He decided to ignore it, focusing instead on maintaining his composure and handling the situation as he knew best. His dignity and patience were his tools now, more powerful than anger or confrontation. As the tour ended, the man suggested they sit by the pool. He offered them water, maintaining a friendly demeanor. The officers accepted, though their gestures were stiff and cautious. Sitting down allowed for a pause, a moment for the tension to ease slightly. He began speaking in a measured, calm way, emphasizing that he wanted the interaction to remain peaceful and professional. He was setting the tone, and it was working slowly but surely. He then took out his phone casually, keeping it visible. He did not yet record, but the officers noticed and asked about it. He explained that he often documented moments for personal and legal records. This simple act added a layer of accountability to the situation. The officers, aware that they were potentially being observed and recorded, seemed to relax slightly, realizing that any aggressive action would be visible and could have consequences. Time passed slowly, yet in that time the dynamics shifted. The officers, who had approached with suspicion and authority, began to show signs of restraint. They questioned less aggressively, their tone softened, and they began to listen more than speak. The man continued to respond with patience and clarity, never showing irritation, never allowing the situation to escalate. He had learned that control often came not from force but from composure and presence. He thought about the lessons he wanted to convey through this encounter. It was not about shaming the officers nor about creating a spectacle. It was about demonstrating the power of calmness, dignity, and truth. It was about showing that even in the face of bias and misunderstanding, one could remain human, compassionate, and firm. These were the principles that had guided him through life, and they guided him now. As the afternoon sun began to dip slightly, casting longer shadows across the pool, the officers finally seemed to acknowledge the reality of the situation. They paused, looked around, and for the first time, they seemed less certain of their own authority. The man observed them carefully, noting the subtle signs of awareness and hesitation. He knew that he had not needed to raise his voice or resort to anger. His calm approach and evidence of ownership had begun to shift the balance. In that moment, the man felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. Not pride in confrontation, but pride in how he handled himself. The peace he sought at the beginning of the day had been disrupted, but he had managed to protect it without aggression. He had maintained control, asserted his rights, and preserved his dignity. These were victories that could not be measured in money or power, but in character and composure. Finally, after what felt like hours but had been only a short while, the officers began to step back, their demeanor softening. They were no longer questioning aggressively, but were more reflective, perhaps beginning to understand the situation beyond their initial assumptions. The man did not press them, did not demand acknowledgement, but allowed the moment to unfold naturally. He had made his point through action, calmness, and presence. As the officers left, the man returned to the pool, wrapping the towel around his shoulders once more. The water reflected the fading sunlight, creating a sense of peace that had been temporarily disturbed but was now returning. He floated gently, letting the water support him, and allowed himself to reflect on the encounter. It had been tense, challenging, and enlightening all at once. He had learned something new about patience, control, and the subtle power of composure. The backyard was quiet again, except for the soft rustle of leaves and the faint hum of distant traffic. He realized that this afternoon had been a reminder of why he valued the life he had built, the freedom to enjoy moments like this, and the ability to face challenges with grace. The encounter with the officers had been a test, but it had also been an affirmation of his journey, his character, and his principles. He remained by the pool, watching the sunlight shimmer on the water, feeling a deep sense of calm and clarity. The tension of the afternoon had passed, but its lessons lingered. He knew that such moments could arise again, and he felt prepared to meet them with the same patience, dignity, and composure. The day had started with a simple desire to enjoy the pool, but it had become a powerful lesson in human interaction, perception, and resilience, and as evening approached, he stepped out of the pool, feeling refreshed but also contemplative. He had faced bias without anger, defended his space without force, and maintained his dignity throughout. The encounter had shown that true strength was not in domination or confrontation, but in the calm assertion of truth and self-respect. And with that thought, he felt a quiet pride settle over him, a reminder that even in moments of challenge, he could remain in control, unshaken, and fully himself. Even after the officers had left, the man remained thoughtful by the pool, reflecting on the afternoon's events. His calm approach had prevented the situation from escalating, but he knew the challenge wasn't entirely over. Encounters like these could leave lingering tension, and he wanted to be proactive in turning the experience into something meaningful, rather than just a moment of conflict. He dried himself off and went inside, grabbing a notebook and a pen. Writing had always helped him process difficult moments. He jotted down every detail, the way the officers approached, their tone, the questions they asked, and his own responses. He wanted to capture everything accurately, not just for his own records, but in case the experience needed to be shared or referenced later. Documentation, he knew, was a powerful tool in situations where truth could be questioned. As he wrote, he thought about the broader implications of what had happened. This wasn't an isolated incident. It reflected patterns he had seen throughout his life: quick judgments, bias, and assumptions based on appearances rather than facts. He understood that his calm response had diffused the immediate tension, but he also realized the encounter could serve a larger purpose. He could use it as a teaching moment, a way to encourage understanding, patience, and dignity in others. He decided to record the story. Not for confrontation, not to shame, but to inform. He set up his phone, framed the shot to include the pool in the backyard, and began speaking. He explained the day, the events that had unfolded, and the way he had chosen to respond. He emphasized calmness, patience, and the importance of asserting truth without aggression. He spoke slowly, clearly, and with warmth, aiming to connect with anyone who might watch, regardless of their background. The recording session lasted an hour, during which he told the story in full detail. He described how the officers had arrived, the assumptions they made, the subtle tension in their gestures, and how he remained composed. He shared the emotions he had felt: frustration, unease, and a quiet determination to remain dignified. He didn't shy away from expressing vulnerability. He wanted the audience to understand that maintaining calm in the face of bias was not always easy, but it was powerful. After finishing the recording, he reviewed it carefully. He noticed moments where his tone carried authority without aggression, and other moments where empathy and explanation shone through. The video, he realized, wasn't just a recounting of events. It was a demonstration of how one could handle challenging encounters with grace and clarity. It was a lesson in composure and self-respect, something that could inspire others facing similar situations. He then shared the video privately with a small circle of trusted friends and colleagues, asking for feedback. Their responses were immediate and encouraging. They praised his clarity, his composure, and his ability to turn a tense situation into a moment of teaching. They recognized the importance of documenting experiences like this, both for personal reflection and as a tool for social awareness. Their validation gave him confidence to share the video more broadly, knowing it had the potential to reach and influence a wider audience. Later that evening, he reflected on the role of technology in situations like this. A simple phone recording could serve as protection, accountability, and education all at once. It was a tool that allowed him to assert his rights without confrontation, to communicate truth without escalating conflict, and to create a record that could be referenced if needed. He thought about how many people didn't realize the power of calm documentation in tense moments, and he resolved to use his experience as an example. The next day, he received messages from neighbors and community members who had heard about the incident. Some expressed surprise at the misunderstanding. Others shared similar experiences, and many praised his composed response. He realized that his story resonated with people because it was real, relatable, and empowering. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about human dignity, courage, and patience. He continued to monitor reactions online as he gradually shared the video more publicly. People commented on his approach, noting how rare it was to see someone respond to bias without anger. They discussed the importance of documentation, of calm communication, and of asserting one's rights while maintaining composure. The story began to spark conversations about respect, fairness, and how small actions could influence larger perceptions. Meanwhile, he reached out to his legal advisors, ensuring that he had full protection if the situation escalated further. Though he had handled the officers calmly, he knew that accountability was important. Preparing for any legal requirements gave him peace of mind, allowing him to focus on the positive impact of his story rather than worry about what could have gone wrong. He also considered the broader community. He realized that experiences like his could be used to educate not just individuals but entire organizations and departments. He began drafting ideas for workshops and presentations that focused on respectful communication, understanding bias, and maintaining dignity in challenging encounters. His personal experience became a platform to encourage awareness and empathy in others, turning an uncomfortable incident into an opportunity for growth. As he walked through his backyard that evening, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The pool reflected the fading sunlight, casting gentle ripples across the patio. He thought about the power of presence, the importance of calm responses, and the way small actions could ripple outward to influence others. This encounter, which had begun with tension and suspicion, had become a lesson in resilience, dignity, and leadership. The following days were filled with a careful balance of reflection, documentation, and engagement. He continued sharing his experience with trusted circles, refining his story, and ensuring that it conveyed both the challenges and the lessons learned. Each retelling reinforced the principles he wanted to emphasize: calmness, patience, composure, and the importance of asserting truth without aggression. The story was no longer just his own. It was becoming a tool for awareness and change. He remained attentive to his own emotional state, understanding that moments of confrontation could leave lingering stress if not processed carefully. Meditation, journaling, and exercise became part of his routine again, providing balance and clarity. He wanted to ensure that his responses were grounded, that his message remained clear, and that he could continue to act as a model for calm, composed leadership in the face of bias. In private moments, he reflected on the contrast between his life now and the struggles he had faced growing up. The journey had been long, filled with challenges that could have easily derailed him. Yet every obstacle had strengthened his character, teaching him lessons in patience, strategy, and self-respect. The encounter with the officers was just one more test of the principles he had cultivated over a lifetime. He also considered the broader implications for society. Incidents like these, though often uncomfortable, highlighted the importance of empathy, understanding, and awareness. He thought about how individuals, organizations, and communities could learn from these moments to foster more respectful interactions. He realized that his calm, measured response could inspire others to handle bias with dignity, turning potentially negative encounters into opportunities for education and growth. By the end of the week, the man felt a renewed sense of confidence. He had faced an unexpected challenge, documented it carefully, and used it to create awareness and understanding. The tension and fear that had initially surfaced had been transformed into clarity and purpose. He knew that this experience would stay with him, not as a source of anger, but as a reminder of the power of composure, documentation, and patient leadership. One evening, as the sun set and the backyard pool shimmered with the last light of day, he reflected on the journey of the past few days. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from wealth or status, but from the knowledge that he had acted with integrity and calm. He had turned a moment of potential conflict into an opportunity for teaching and reflection, and that was a victory in itself. He looked at the pool, the water reflecting the colors of the sunset, and allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. This was not about proving anything to the officers or the neighbors. It was about maintaining his principles, standing firm in his dignity, and showing that even in challenging situations, one could respond with grace. The experience had strengthened his resolve and given him a renewed sense of purpose. As night fell, he prepared to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to share his story, educate others, and continue his work in building understanding and empathy in his community. The incident, which could have been a source of frustration or fear, had become a turning point, a reminder that strength was measured not in aggression, but in calm, deliberate action and unwavering dignity. The following morning, the man woke up early, feeling a sense of purpose. The events of the previous days were still fresh in his mind, and he wanted to ensure that his experience could have a positive impact beyond his own life. He prepared a cup of coffee and sat on the patio overlooking the pool, thinking carefully about how to share his story responsibly. The sunlight reflected off the water, casting gentle ripples across the backyard, and for the first time in a while, he felt a sense of quiet determination and focus. He decided to post the video he had recorded online. He wanted to reach people who might face similar challenges, those who could feel powerless in the face of misunderstanding or bias. He spent time editing the video carefully, ensuring that it was clear, concise, and respectful. Every word, every pause, every gesture mattered. The goal was to educate and inspire, not to shame or humiliate anyone. He reviewed the video multiple times, thinking about the message it would send and the people who might see it. Once satisfied, he uploaded it to social media, sharing the story of what had happened at his pool. He explained the context, the encounter with the officers, and how he had chosen to respond with patience, composure, and dignity. He highlighted the importance of remaining calm in tense situations, of documenting events for safety and clarity, and of asserting truth without aggression. He spoke to his audience as if he were speaking directly to them, hoping that his experience could provide guidance and reassurance. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments began pouring in from people all over the country. Many shared similar experiences, praising his calm response and expressing admiration for his composure. Some people were inspired to reflect on their own actions and attitudes, recognizing the impact that assumptions and bias could have on others. The man read each comment carefully, feeling a deep sense of connection to those who were engaging with his story. He realized that his experience, though personal, had struck a chord with a much larger audience. News outlets began to notice the story as well. Journalists reached out for interviews, wanting to hear directly from him about what had happened. He accepted, knowing that this was another opportunity to educate the public about patience, dignity, and the importance of fair treatment. During interviews, he spoke calmly and clearly, focusing on the lessons rather than the conflict. He emphasized that the story was not about revenge or punishment, but about demonstrating the power of composure and respect. As the media coverage grew, the police department involved in the incident became aware of the attention. Internal discussions began, and an investigation was launched into the conduct of the officers. While he did not seek this outcome for the sake of retribution, he understood that accountability was necessary. The incident had highlighted a broader issue, and addressing it openly could contribute to meaningful change. He hoped that the officers involved would learn from the experience, and that the department could take steps to improve training and awareness. The man also received support from community leaders, advocacy groups, and legal experts. They praised his calm, measured approach and encouraged him to continue using his platform to raise awareness. Meetings and phone calls were scheduled to discuss potential workshops and educational programs that could benefit both the community and law enforcement personnel. He began to see how a single encounter, handled thoughtfully, could ripple outward to create real-world impact. Meanwhile, he continued to engage with his audience online. He responded to messages with care, offering advice, encouragement, and insight. He emphasized the importance of preparation, documentation, and emotional control in difficult situations. He shared strategies for asserting one's rights without confrontation and for fostering understanding through calm communication. Each interaction reinforced the message that strength came from dignity, not aggression, and that composure could transform a moment of tension into a moment of clarity and influence. Back at his home, he returned to his daily routine with a renewed sense of purpose. He spent mornings at the pool, afternoons in his home office, and evenings reflecting on his goals and the lessons of the past week. The incident had disrupted his routine, but it had also provided clarity and direction. He felt empowered by the knowledge that his calm response had inspired others and had prompted conversations about fairness, bias, and respect. One afternoon, he invited a small group of neighbors and community members to his home. The gathering was casual but meaningful. He shared his experience in person, emphasizing the principles he had practiced throughout the encounter. He spoke about patience, dignity, and the importance of standing firm in one's truth. The attendees listened attentively, asking questions and engaging in thoughtful discussion. Many expressed gratitude for his openness and for the opportunity to learn from his experience. As the days passed, the story continued to gain attention. Social media shares increased. News segments highlighted the incident, and people reached out from across the country to express support and admiration. The man remained grounded, focusing on the positive impact rather than the attention itself. He knew that the real success was not in popularity, but in the ability to influence understanding, compassion, and fairness. He also took time to reflect on his own growth. The encounter had tested his patience, composure, and strategic thinking. It had reminded him of the importance of preparation and calm action in the face of misunderstanding. He realized that the principles he had developed over his lifetime, patience, dignity, and clarity, were not just useful in professional settings, but essential in personal interactions and moments of public scrutiny. The experience reinforced his belief that character and composure could overcome fear, bias, and tension. One evening, he received a call from the police department. Representatives wanted to discuss the incident, acknowledge the challenges, and explore opportunities for improved communication and training. He approached the conversation with the same calm and clarity he had displayed throughout the encounter. He listened carefully, provided constructive feedback, and offered suggestions for education and training that could benefit both officers and the community. The dialogue was respectful and productive, and he felt that his experience could now contribute to positive change within the department itself. At home, he continued to focus on his work, his community, and his personal growth. The pool, once a symbol of quiet relaxation, now also represented resilience, composure, and thoughtful action. He spent time with family and close friends, sharing stories and reflections from the past week. They celebrated the lessons learned, the influence achieved, and the way a challenging situation had been transformed into an opportunity for understanding and connection. The man also considered the long-term impact of sharing his story. He planned workshops, online seminars, and discussions that could reach a broader audience, emphasizing the principles of calm communication, patience, and dignity in challenging encounters. He recognized that his experience was a case study in how one individual could influence awareness and behavior, demonstrating that composure and strategy could turn potential conflict into education and empowerment. He reflected on the journey from tension to influence, from misunderstanding to awareness. The officer's visit, the recording, the media coverage, and the conversations with the community had all contributed to a larger story, one about human dignity, patience, and the quiet strength of calm action. The man understood that this story was not just about one incident, but about the ripple effects of thoughtful behavior, the power of documentation, and the impact of composure in difficult situations. As evening fell, he returned to the pool, letting the water envelop him in its familiar calm. The sunlight had faded, replaced by the gentle glow of outdoor lighting. He thought about the impact of the past days, the lessons learned, and the conversation sparked by his experience. He felt a sense of peace and accomplishment, knowing that his response had been measured, deliberate, and respectful. The incident had transformed from a moment of tension into a platform for education and influence. He allowed himself to enjoy the quiet moment, reflecting on how a single encounter could change perceptions, prompt conversations, and inspire understanding. The story he had shared, handled with care and composure, had reached far beyond the walls of his home. It had touched lives, inspired dialogue, and demonstrated that patience, dignity, and calm action could lead to meaningful impact. And as he looked at the rippling pool, he felt a quiet pride, knowing that he had not only defended his space but had also contributed to something greater than himself. The next morning, the man woke up feeling a sense of calm and satisfaction. The weeks of tension and uncertainty had passed, and what remained was a deep understanding of the power of composure, patience, and clarity. Today, the day felt lighter, more purposeful, and he intended to use it wisely. He walked through the house quietly, enjoying the soft sounds of morning. The birds, the distant hum of traffic, and the gentle rustling of leaves outside. Even the pool, glimmering in the sunlight, seemed to reflect a sense of renewal. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. From a childhood filled with challenges to building a successful business and finally reaching a place of security and independence, every step had been shaped by determination and resilience. Today, however, was about reflection and consolidation. The incident with the officers, though stressful, had taught him invaluable lessons about human nature, perception, and the quiet power of remaining composed under pressure. He decided to spend the morning outside by the pool, letting the sunlight warm him and the water soothe him. He reflected on how a simple moment of misunderstanding had turned into a story that could reach thousands, even millions of people. The video he shared had been widely viewed, and the response had been overwhelmingly positive. People admired his calm, his dignity, and the way he had handled the situation without resorting to anger or confrontation. As he floated gently in the water, he thought about the lessons he wanted others to take from his experience. He realized that while wealth and success had given him certain advantages, the true power in the encounter had been in his mindset and approach. Remaining calm, documenting the interaction, and responding with dignity had shifted the dynamic entirely. It was not about money or influence. It was about character, strategy, and the ability to act with clarity under pressure. Later that afternoon, he received an unexpected call. It was from the police department. The officers involved had been instructed to come to his home to offer a personal apology and to better understand how their actions had impacted him. He prepared himself mentally for the meeting, reminding himself to remain composed, patient, and respectful. He wanted the encounter to be meaningful, a step toward reconciliation rather than confrontation. When the officers arrived, he greeted them calmly and invited them to sit in the backyard. The air was tense, but he focused on creating a space for dialogue. He allowed them to speak first, listening carefully to their words. They explained their perspective, acknowledged the misunderstanding, and expressed regret for the assumptions and tension that had occurred. Throughout the conversation, he maintained his calm demeanor, responding thoughtfully and emphasizing the importance of understanding, awareness, and patience. He shared his own perspective with them, explaining how their assumptions had affected him and why it was important to approach situations with respect and clarity. He highlighted the lessons he had learned from the experience and suggested ways they could improve communication and interactions with community members. The officers listened attentively, and a sense of mutual understanding began to develop. The meeting was not just about an apology. It was about fostering awareness and creating a more respectful environment for the future. After the officers left, he felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The encounter had transformed from a moment of tension into a moment of education and reconciliation. He realized that true strength lay in the ability to respond with dignity, to educate rather than retaliate, and to turn a negative situation into a positive outcome. He reflected on how patience, composure, and clear communication could create understanding even in challenging circumstances. He spent the evening reviewing the feedback and comments from the public, reading messages of support, and reflecting on the positive impact his story had already made. People from different backgrounds shared their experiences and expressed gratitude for his example. Many noted how rare it was to see someone handle bias and misunderstanding without anger or retaliation. The responses reinforced his belief that calmness and dignity could have far-reaching effects beyond a single encounter. Over the next few days, he continued to meet with community members, colleagues, and friends to discuss the incident and its lessons. He organized small gatherings and conversations, emphasizing the importance of empathy, patience, and clear communication. His story became a teaching tool, inspiring dialogue and reflection on the ways people interact, perceive one another, and respond to challenging situations. He also considered how this experience could be used to benefit others on a broader scale. He began planning workshops and seminars focused on respectful communication, bias awareness, and the power of composure in difficult encounters. By sharing his experience, he aimed to equip others with the skills to navigate misunderstandings, assert their rights calmly, and foster understanding in their own communities. The encounter at the pool, once stressful, had now become a foundation for positive change. In the quiet moments, he reflected on the journey from conflict to influence. The incident had tested his patience, composure, and clarity, but it had also reinforced his values and strengthened his resolve. He realized that the lessons he had learned were not just applicable to interactions with law enforcement, but to all aspects of life, family, business, and community engagement. Calmness, dignity, and thoughtful action could transform challenges into opportunities for growth and understanding. One evening, as the sun set over the backyard, he invited close friends and family to join him at the pool. They shared stories, laughter, and reflection, celebrating not only his personal growth but also the broader impact of his story. He explained the events, the lessons learned, and the positive changes that had occurred as a result. The gathering was a testament to the power of composure, education, and connection. He continued to document his journey, writing down reflections, strategies, and insights that could serve as guidance for others. He emphasized the importance of preparation, patience, and clarity, and how these qualities could shape outcomes even in tense situations. By combining personal experience with practical advice, he created a resource that could educate, inspire, and empower others facing similar challenges. The pool, once simply a place for relaxation, now symbolized resilience, composure, and thoughtful action. Each ripple in the water reminded him of the broader impact of a single encounter and how measured responses could influence perceptions and inspire understanding. The lessons of patience, dignity, and strategic calm had extended far beyond his home, reaching countless people who had viewed the story and engaged with its message. As days turned into weeks, he maintained his routine of reflection, engagement, and education. He balanced work, family, and community involvement, always keeping in mind the principles that had guided him through the encounter. He shared the story whenever opportunities arose, not to boast but to teach, inspire, and encourage others to act with dignity and clarity in difficult moments. He understood that life would continue to present challenges and misunderstandings, but he felt prepared to face them with composure and intelligence. The encounter with the officers, once stressful and unsettling, had become a powerful lesson in human behavior, strategy, and the importance of maintaining integrity under pressure. It was a reminder that strength was measured not in anger or confrontation, but in the ability to remain calm, assert truth respectfully, and influence outcomes positively. Finally, one evening, as he sat by the pool watching the reflection of the sunset on the water, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He had turned a potentially negative experience into a lesson for himself and others. He had demonstrated that composure, dignity, and strategic action could create meaningful impact, inspire change, and foster understanding. The incident, once a source of tension and uncertainty, had become a story of resilience, leadership, and human connection. He knew that the story would continue to resonate with people, inspire dialogue, and encourage reflection. But for him, the most important outcome was personal growth, the realization that patience, clarity, and dignity could overcome fear, bias, and tension. The pool shimmered gently under the fading light, reflecting the quiet pride he felt in handling the situation with intelligence and grace. As night fell and the backyard grew quiet, he rested, knowing that he had turned a difficult moment into a lasting lesson. The story of the encounter, the calm response, and the thoughtful actions would remain with him and with those who had learned from it. And as he looked at the rippling water, he felt a deep sense of peace, accomplishment, and pride, a reminder that true strength lay not in conflict, but in the quiet power of patience, dignity, and understanding.